Good morning, and thank you for joining us for the first webinar in the Incident Reduction Series, Autism, Simple Strategies to Reduce Incidents. My name is Heather Leffler, Northeast Regional Liaison with DODD, and with me is...
Hi, I'm Jody Giesler, and I'm the MUI Regional Manager.
This webinar information was developed by OCALI, Ohio Center for Autism and Low Incidence, and DODD in partnership for the statewide training supporting youth in transition and adults with autism spectrum disorder, ASD, building awareness, accessing resources, and using tools, also known as DODD Autism Series. It will build upon your knowledge and provide strategies when interviewing individuals and identifying cause and contributing factors and prevention planning. A few housekeeping items. Proof of continuing professional development, CPD units, will be emailed for those who actively participated in the webinar within 30 days of the webinar and who view this webinar live on 2/28/19. Please only send in group attendance if you are watching with more than one person. Each person must supply their own email address in order to receive a certificate, and please write legibly. If you have problems hearing or logging in, please hang up and call again. You can also call IT support for additional assistance at the number provided on the screen, or follow up by email or phone to the MUI office at 614-995-3810. Also, please submit questions, and if we can't get to them during the webinar, we will respond with answers to your questions. This webinar will be recorded and be posted in DODD's training webinar catalog. The learning objectives for today: you will learn how to use the simple strategies and tips to enhance interactions with people with ASD throughout your investigative work, such as identifying contributing factors during investigations, develop prevention plans to prevent reoccurrence, and share resources to further the understanding of ASD. We are starting with the simple strategies and tips to enhance interactions with people with ASD. We are assuming many of you on this webinar have extensive knowledge of the characteristics of ASD. However, if you want more information or need to refresh your knowledge about ASD, we will provide resources at the end of this webinar to help you. All right, simple strategies are foundational in supporting people with ASD. The first simple strategy is using interest. Most people with ASD have a special interest, so look for what engages and excites the individual. These are the passions and the areas of expertise. Interests are ways to bring out the best in people, and you can see them shine with significant contributions. You can also use special interests to help people through challenging times, to help them feel comfortable, valued, and engaged in their passions. And also, please explain to others that a person's intense interest is not an obsession that should be avoided, but you really can build on it. Jody, do you have some case examples?
I do, and the examples I'm going to share today are true stories. These are actual examples of MUIs that I've reviewed sometime in the last couple months, and they worked perfectly in some of the scenarios we're going to talk about today. So I have an individual who his special interest is collecting cars, and he is passionate about collecting cars, and he's very proud of his collection and likes to share it with others. And one day when staff came in to work, he wanted to show a new car to that person, and they just didn't have time for it because we know our DSPs are so busy. There are schedules to follow and things that need to get done every day for all the people in the home that live together. And she just didn't have time, and she just kept saying, no, I don't want to see it. I can't see it right now. And he became really upset, and he became so upset he began harming himself. He destroyed property. He ended up having to be restrained. And it could have all been avoided if she would have just taken a few moments to acknowledge that this new special car that he got was something important to him, that she could, show that she was also interested in it. And I think the whole situation could have been avoided. I also have another example where it was a more positive interaction. This is a story from a mom who, this child is very interested in Pokemon. He knows everything about Pokemon. He didn't have any friends at school, and his mom was trying to figure out ways for him to make some friends. So she decided to get him the Pokemon trading cards, and he started trading with kids at recess time, during lunch. Then it evolved into play dates at the family home, and they went and started meeting in parks and restaurants. And when it was his birthday time, he had a giant birthday party with a Pokemon theme, and he was able to invite all his classmates, and it was just a really positive way to use his special interest.
That's awesome.
Heather, do you have a success story?
I do, and this comes from the field. There was a team who was supporting a man who he would always ask everyone where their name badges were, and it was constant, and it was really difficult to get past this part of the conversation with him. He would ask the same person, he'd already seen, to see their badge over and over. So the team that supported him came up with the idea that he could be the greeter at the front door of the agency. So in this role, he was able to assure that everyone who entered had proper identification, and he loved looking at all the name badges and greeting all the visitors. If they didn't, he would say, "Oh no, you better go get a name tag before you go in there." It's just really exciting to see that they were able to reframe his interest into something productive, and it also gave him an opportunity to have a valued social role. All right, the next simple strategy is prepare for what's coming up. This is really critical for supporting people with ASD. If they do not know what's coming up in their schedule or what's next, it causes a lot of anxiety and distress. So use whatever method or tool to help the person understand what is going to happen, what's next, what's the schedule. Again, knowing what is happening will reduce anxiety, increase engagement, and help a person prepare for challenges in the environment. So as investigators, it's a really good idea to ask the question, does the person have a visual schedule of their morning, their evening, their weekend routine? Jody, do you have some examples? Oh, I have a success story before we get to your case examples.
Okay.
So there was a person who was being supported out in the community. Again, this is a true story. He would become agitated when his routine was disrupted due to medical appointments. So the team got together and they decided to put together photos of him, staff with a van, him in the van, the physician, the nurse, and his favorite restaurant. And then staff would share these pictures in the order of events to help him understand what was going to happen. Some people with ASD need this repeated for a few weeks prior to the appointment, while others only prefer this information on the day of the appointment. So it's really important to know the person that you're supporting and how they want to prepare for what's coming up next.
And here are some examples of visual schedules that we found online. There are pages and pages of visual schedules, so it's nice to see that other people are accessing this across the United States and probably other countries too. But we figured, why reinvent the wheel? If you go online, you can find a multitude of ones that may work for the individual that you're supporting. And I do have an example. Life happens. I have an individual who their favorite staff person called in sick, and the other staff person didn't want to tell her because they knew how upset she would be. So they just avoided that the whole shift. And then when the substitute staff showed up, the individual began to harm herself. She was biting her wrist to the point where she was bleeding. She was banging her head. She ended up being restrained for 30 minutes in a two-person restraint. And I understand why staff didn't want to upset her for like the whole 6 or 8 hour shift she was there, but it's so important for our folks to know what's happening next. And we need to be more mindful that things in life happen. People get sick or their car breaks down on the way to work and they don't show up when they're supposed to. So let's always plan for that plan B. What happens when plan A doesn't work? And that could just be a matter of having a picture book of every staff person's photo in that book. And then maybe the floaters too, or the substitute staff, so the individuals know who's coming in my house this shift, who's going to be here, who's going to walk through that door, so they're not surprised when they get there. I also have another example of an individual. Every Thursday, this individual goes to the Y to swim. It's part of their routine. It's something they love to do. And one day, the staff had to be dropped off at the house because their car wasn't working. And the individual became upset, angry, ran out of the house. And the police were called to find the individual, and it ended up with a missing person because they couldn't find him for a long period of time. And part of that was maybe the approach should have been changed so that that individual knew that, we might not be able to go to the Y today, but we're going to go again a different day. Let's see if we can find somebody else to take us tonight. What is our plan B? Could a supervisor have come to the home to help out? A family member, a community member? I don't know. What about Uber? I'm not sure, but just plan for the unanticipated situations, because they do occur. And don't be afraid to ask somebody else for help, and make sure that you reassure the individual that, just because they couldn't make it to the Y today doesn't mean they'll never go again.
Great examples, Jody. All right, so here's another success story. So there was a child who was going to be spending some time in respite. So the team worked with him on making sure that he understood that his routine would remain the same as it was when he was with family. And it also kept staff on track too. Some of the tasks on the schedule were homework before TV, calling his family at 7 p.m., and taking a shower in the morning. This really helped create consistency and took the risk of power struggles out of the equation, because it wasn't staff pushing an arbitrary schedule onto the child. It was one they were a part of along with the child. Also, the child was given a tour ahead of time to see the respite home, where his bedroom would be, talk about the home and the other people who were living there, and he also met the staff he would be working with. And then the same type of reverse preparing happened when the child was going back to the family's home. He was given the details in advance, and he was able to talk through the fears he may have. And this respite team also stayed connected with him as long as he wanted by phone calls after he had transitioned to another family member's home. The respite team was able to provide positive feedback, encouragement, and make sure that everyone knew that they believed the child was a good kid and he would be successful.
That's a great story, and it's a great way to prepare our individuals.
All right, so the next simple strategy is using visual supports. We've already talked about this, and sometimes you're going to see that these strategies and the tips, they're kind of interwoven as you're supporting people. So visual supports are written words, pictures, icons, photos, objects, or anything the person sees that helps them understand and express. Visual supports can also help people that are verbal as well as those who may have language delays. So, and when in doubt, write it out.
And I do have an example from an MUI that I recently had. So I have an individual who was looking forward to going to a basketball game, and he repeatedly asked staff, when are we going to the game? When are we going to the game? And staff just kept saying, oh, we're going later. And she didn't mean any harm by this. She just said, we're going later. Well, he continued to ask, and he kind of got, it started escalating, and he began rocking, and he actually was invading his housemate's personal space, asking him when they were going to the basketball game. And the other roommate really didn't like that. So they began yelling at one another and pushing one another. And then, an individual hit his roommate, and they had to be physically separated, and the peer ended up being restrained. So it's a whole big scenario that was starting off as a really positive day because we were getting ready to go to a basketball game. So I think that would have been handled differently by the individual given a concrete time. Like, the game starts at 3. So after lunch, we're going to get ready and we're going to leave the house at this time. And maybe the person doesn't know how to tell time. So maybe you have a clock with hands that shows, here's lunch, here's when the basketball game is. And so when we get here, you'll know that that's what's coming after we have lunch, and we get in the van and we go. So if the person isn't able to read a clock, but maybe a picture clock is something that they would understand, or some sort of other visual schedule to know what is happening next. I have another story too, with an individual who uses an iPad to communicate, and their iPad is loaded with all sorts of icons so they can describe what they want in their day or how they want their day to look, and anywhere from the morning routine to what they want for lunch to where they may want to go out, for some fun activities. Well, this iPad had a dead battery and they couldn't find the cord, and the individual was so frustrated, and that really, it took their voice away. They felt like they didn't have any choice, and he began to punch himself in the face, and staff ended up having to put him in a basket hold. So again, things happen. I lose things at my house all the time, or the cord gets eaten by the dog, and so
me too.
Yeah, so thinking about having a backup plan for that as well. Maybe it's a picture book with the same icons that are loaded in his iPad. So in case there's a failure of power or something, that you can use that to communicate. Even if it's writing down on a dry erase board so the person can communicate what their wants or needs are. And I understand some people have key rings, so it's a very portable thing where they can show exactly what they want and what they mean. So that is their form of communication, and is so important to keep that in mind for future events.
So I have some success stories. Again, these are real stories. And we encourage you to share these stories and these case examples with the teams that you're working with. I have heard from providers that sometimes, the direct service professionals, they're just not really sure about some of these strategies. So we're giving you lots of success stories from the field of actual, DSP work, so that maybe if it worked for someone else, it'll probably work for us. So there was a young man who was refusing to leave his home for a very long period of time, over a year, and he needed some extensive dental work. So the team, they've been trying everything, and they finally put together some photos about going to the dentist, and they shared the social story with him for a period of time prior to his appointment. The use of these pictures helped him to understand what was going to happen, preparing for what's next, and that staff would be with him. And this was so successful for this person that he did not need the PRN medication prior to the appointment, as his team had considered. And he also didn't need to hold staff's hand either, as they offered it to him. He's been very successful from that point forward, going out of his house, and the team, especially the direct service professionals, were so happy that this worked.
That is amazing progress for someone who hadn't left their house in a year and then didn't even need the extra interventions to get the service they need at the dental office. I mean, that's amazing.
And I have a couple of more, too, success stories. You had talked about this earlier, Jody, about the importance of staff schedules. There's a provider agency out in the field that is they feel that staff schedules are so important. They do this practice, and they firmly believe it makes a huge difference for the people with ASD, as well as other people with developmental disabilities. There's a lot of trauma that's experienced by people with developmental disabilities, and just knowing which staff are going to be there, particularly at night, if you wake up and you need help, who is going to be the person who's going to support me? So always just having pictures of the staff who are going to be working really, really helps. Also, there's a success story with transportation. Sometimes people just don't understand what the expectation is to be a safe rider. So using visual supports, such as pictures of an unbuckled seatbelt versus a buckled seatbelt, and then having reminders that we use the buckled seatbelt while the vehicle is moving. And you can post those right by their seat for a reminder. It's a nice visual support, just showing them how we're supposed to ride in the vehicle. And then this agency also gives a certificate for being a safe rider.
And remember, our individuals, most of them on the autism spectrum or not on the spectrum, they are functioning in a concrete operational phase. And so maybe every day when they see that picture, they know that's what is expected of them, because sometimes if that memory is gone, they don't know that was what they were supposed to do. And that visual picture can be a cue for, oh, this is what I should do, and this is how it looks.
Exactly. All right, moving on to the fourth strategy, simple strategy, which is provide time. Provide time to process the spoken word as well as the environment. Individuals with ASD may need time away from stress and demands of the day, but provide this time proactively. Don't make the person earn this time. Providing time when you're talking to someone doesn't come naturally, especially for those of us who talk really fast like me. You want to give people 5 to 10 seconds of time before you move on to the next statement you're going to make. And you really should consider, role-playing this in staff meetings and really practicing this 5 to 10 second lag of providing time, because it doesn't come naturally. We get uncomfortable with silence, but it is so critical in supporting people with ASD.
And my husband, he is an SSA, and he supports a person who needs 30 seconds to process, which is really an eternity when you're having a conversation, but that is what that person needs. And I want investigators to keep in mind, during an investigation, and you may think that the individual isn't cooperating with you because they're not answering the questions, but think about it. Are you firing off questions? What were you doing yesterday? Well, who else was in the room? And if you're just giving them one question after another, they don't have time to process. They may still be working on the first thing that you said. And so you want to really make sure that you give them that pause and that time to think through the question. And also, in an area where you do the interview is important, because it needs to be a quiet place where they're comfortable and there aren't those sensory issues overload, like, are the lights too bright? Is it really loud? Is there some sort of operational machine out, and maybe you're at the work site and it's really loud? I bet you want to really be cognizant of that to make it very comfortable for the individual and their sensory needs.
Exactly. Thank you, Jody. I do have a success story. So I was working with a provider agency, and they shared with me that just last week, a new direct service professional told the trainer the day after the training, hey, I tried that waiting 10 seconds thing, and it really worked. So it does really work. We just have to practice giving that time.
And sharing this information with our DSPs.
Yes.
Okay, how about let's go on to the next tip.
All right. Speak simply and clearly. The message of the spoken word can be difficult to process and can be confusing. Less is more. Use words that are concrete and meaningful. Eliminate unnecessary words. And pace your language. Take your time giving the person a direction, asking a question, or commenting. Wait. So one provider explains this as dinner's ready. And if you like to talk a lot like I do, oh, do you smell dinner? Oh, that food smells amazing. I'm so hungry. Are you hungry? Let's go eat. The provider, instead of saying all those words, will just tell the person dinner's ready and then give the nonverbal of pointing toward the kitchen. And that is so much more successful than all of those words that I said originally.
Yes. Okay, let's move on to the tips.
Tips to enhance interactions with individuals with ASD. The first tip is give me space. So sensory sensitivities can cause extreme stress and anxiety, and touch sensitivities or needs can become overwhelming. So some ideas with this, provide a special place where the person can feel safe and ready himself for interaction. Attempt to stay back more than an arm length away and move slowly into a person's personal space. Always ask for permission to touch. Please don't assume that it's okay to even touch lightly. And let the person choose where they want to sit, stand, or pace. Jody, do you have a case example for this?
I do. I have an individual who, he was at his home and he began to be upset, and I'm not sure why, but he went to his room to calm, and his room is his sanctuary. That's where he feels most comfortable and safe. And even in his plan, the team knows that that's his place to go when he wants to become calm and remain calm. And he was having a negative interaction with his family member, and this family member actually followed him into his room, and that's where he was going to calm down, and he attacked her, and it took 2 staff people to physically intervene. He felt very trapped, and his fight instinct kicked in when his family member entered his room. And I know that there's so much thought and planning in ISPs, and the team had clearly indicated that, that is his calm space. That's where he goes to calm, stay back, stay out of his room. And just in the heat of the moment, that didn't happen. So it's really important to think about that. If our individuals have a safe space to retreat, let them go there. And if they don't have one, let's create a space. Let's find something that's calming to them so they have a place to go to. And maybe it's a favorite chair. Maybe it's not a room, but a swing or something. And I think, Heather, you have an example of
I do.
Okay, let's go with that.
All right. So I just wanted to share a success story. One time I did a visit with an intermediate care facility, an ICF, and when I walked into the dining room, they had this huge round table. And it didn't overwhelm the space in the room, but it was a big table where everybody had ample room to be able to either eat dinner or to do crafts. And they had plenty of space around them. And then the provider also shared that table could be broken up into modules so that everybody could still be in the same room enjoying dinner together, but have plenty of space for themselves. Also, another provider shared that they were working with a person with ASD, and the person was showing a lot of physical aggression. And so they were doing the arm length distance from the person, but they were still seeing the physical aggression. So then they backed it up to 3 feet and thinking maybe he just needed some more space. They were, really looking at the data. So they tried the 3 feet, but the person still continued with the physical aggression. So they thought, well, maybe we should try the 6 feet. And they did, and then all of a sudden the physical aggression stopped. That person just needed 6 feet radius around them in order to feel safe and in control. Now, I realize that, you can't always provide that 6 feet radius around someone if you're, supporting them to do hygiene tasks or other tasks, but just trying to honor that 6 feet space, throughout the day as much as you possibly can, so that person just feels as much control as they possibly can.
Great.
All right, moving on to tip number 2. Turn down the noise and the lights. Sensory sensitivities can extend to how people hear the sounds in their environment and how lights or colors affect them. And sometimes it can be so overwhelming that the person cannot move, or it's so painful that they're going to do whatever they can to escape. So some ideas: try to eliminate multiple sounds within an environment. And you may want to consider recording an environment, because we just tend to get used to the environments and we don't pick up on all the noises that really are present in an environment. But if you record, you can actually pinpoint, whoa, that is a lot of noise. How can we eliminate that? Or this noise over here that's just every so often, but it's really shrill. So consider recording the environment if you're looking to turn down the noise to help somebody with their sensory sensitivities. Allowing the use of headphones at school, work, or the community. There are so many different options with this. And there's a lot of discrete options too that people, could use that will really make a big difference. Change the lighting by turning off lights or only using lamps. So many of the places that we go to have the fluorescent lights, and they have the constant humming, and the lighting is just really harsh, and it really can impact somebody's ability to be in that environment due to the sensory sensitivities. And sometimes if you can just reduce just one of these stressors, it will make a huge difference with a person's anxiety and stress levels.
And I know my pediatrician's office, they have these really great covers for their fluorescent lights. And actually, I found them online because I considered getting one for my office. But they're seascapes, or they're just white fluffy clouds with a beautiful blue sky in the background. And it's really calming, and it diffuses that harsh lighting. And they did it to accommodate their kids on the spectrum.
Awesome.
They see a lot of special needs kids, and it's great to help with that. But it helps everyone, I think.
I agree.
And I do have an example. So an individual woke up about 1 a.m. and actually she was awakened by her roommate singing in the room right outside her bedroom. And this really made her angry. Like, the light under the door woke her up, and the loud voice of her roommate singing. And she began to go after the consumer, and the staff person had to intervene, and ended up getting kicked and bitten herself. And the individual ended up being restrained. And so, sometimes folks do wake up in the middle of the night and they're wide awake.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be a matter of just being cognizant of, is there another place in the house I can go with the individual that's awake so she won't disturb her roommates? I was talking to my family. We all have sound machines in our room, or we use a fan. That white noise just really helps block out the barking dogs or crazy noise going on, in the neighborhoods, the trash man coming at 4 in the morning. Who wants to wake up from that noise? So just thinking about our individuals, just having that background noise may drown out the sounds that could awaken them in the night. And it's just something as simple as turning on a fan, or getting a sound machine, or some sort of white noise machine, and keeping the lights down and the individuals in another part of the house so they don't awaken the other housemates. Heather, do you have a story?
I do have a success story. So there was a young man who was struggling to find work in the community. Most of the places that he had tried out had fluorescent lights, which really hurt his eyes. So when the direct care staff were educated on just how painful these lights were, and they used sensory simulations, which are a very powerful tool. It really puts you in that person's, in their experience of how they're processing the sensory information. So the staff, as a result of this experience with the sensory simulation, they became a very strong advocate for this young man, and they started requesting that employers allow him to wear either a ball cap or sunglasses when he was working, because those fluorescent lights were just so painful for him. So he, along with his direct care staff advocating, he was able to find a job in a dish room where the staff actually encouraged him to wear his ball cap, and they have a couple of extras just in case he forgets. So that's a great story.
Yes, thank you.
Tip number 3, listen or look for the behavior message behind the behavior. Behavior is communication. When you see someone acting differently or in a way that is confusing, try to understand that he or she may be communicating messages such as fear, anxiety, pain, confusion, happiness, anger, hunger, or so many other potential messages. Just always consider that hidden message in the behavior before you respond. Always try to respond with a comforting word, a choice between several options, or change what you were doing, which we'll talk a little bit more about in tip number 6. So these are actual words from a DSP about looking for the message behind the behavior. We go into detective mode, trying to figure out why people do the things they do. The behavior is just the tip of the iceberg. We're trying to figure out what's underneath. What are the thoughts, feelings, unmet needs? We do some respectful guessing, and if it seems to help, we're guessing in the right direction, and it's melting the iceberg.
That is great insight from a DSP. I am so glad that she shared that with you.
Absolutely. Do you have a case example, Jody?
I do. This is an example that it's positive, even though it did result in an individual being restrained for a short amount of time. So an SSA happened to be walking by, and she noticed that an individual that she supports was crying, yelling, shaking her head no, hitting herself in the face, and staff were holding her hands down. And there were 3 staff members there because they were all so worried about her, and they really care and wanted to calm her down.
Sure.
And the SSA said, hey, remember to give her some space to calm down.
Excellent.
So the staff backed up, and she said, okay, now we need to suggest her favorite music. Sometimes she likes to listen to that to calm down. So once they provided the space and she began to listen to the music, she calmed down. And the supervisor said the individual just hasn't been herself all week, and today is the first time she became this upset and started hurting herself.
Huh.
So the SSA, being the great SSA that she was, she called her mom, the individual's mom, and the mom said, oh yeah, she has a sinus infection, and the doctor gave her a different antibiotic than normal, but she's still just not acting like herself. And this individual is always prone to sinus infections, but she really likes going to her day hab program every day and didn't want to miss it. So that's why mom continued to send her in.
Sure.
Well, what ended up being the message behind the behavior was that she still had the sinus infection. She still had that horrible head and face pain that you get. I don't know if you guys get those sinus infections, but they're horrible. And so she ended up getting the new medication, and finally her symptoms dissipated. So again, there was a very important message behind that individual's behavior, and thankfully everybody communicated well, and she was able to get the help she needed. But I always want our IAs to think about this, that underlying cause to the behavior, and we're going to see in lots of MUIs that are unapproved behavior supports. The message that the individual could be telling you, like if they're stuffing their hands in their mouth, it could be a sign of GERD or other GI issues. Smacking your ear could be an earache. Smacking your face could be a toothache, a sinus infection. Smacking your head could be a headache. So just thinking about what are the underlying messages here. Could it be a sensory issue, or could it be a medical issue? Do you have a success story, Heather?
I do.
Okay.
It's a really powerful one, too. There was a child who was in foster care, and the foster care family was having a difficult time supporting this child due to him urinating in places that were not the toilet. He was urinating in the closet. So this child was going to spend some time in respite, and the respite team treated it as a sign that we should look for the reason behind it. So the staff were paying close attention, keeping an open mind, and they did learn that the child did in fact have incontinence, and so the team brought in the nighttime briefs to eliminate the situation. And if there was a true accident, it was in the briefs, and then staff could help the child figure out how to clean up and take care of the situation. As they continued working with this child, they learned that there was a lot of trauma in this child's past, mostly at night. The child's biological mother had been involved with prostitution, and if the child left their bedroom at night, they would see things that were disturbing, and then they would be punished for seeing these things. So this meant that the child would hide in the closet and would not come out, even to use the toilet. They would rather, the child would rather go in the closet than view the things that would lead to punishment. So the team, knowing this, took a different approach in supporting him. They learned to put a light on in the closet, so the closet didn't look like a big empty cave where he could hide. They also learned that the child really responded well to a lot of reassurance at night, especially calming words, tone, just making sure, sometimes it's not intentional, but abrupt tone, or, you really have to be very cognizant of how you're speaking and the tone that you're using. And this team was able to, really just calm and really be able to support this child differently. And he's in a much better place now, feeling much safer and secure at night.
Did he have any more accidents after this?
Actually, the team reported, thank you for bringing that up, in the 6-week period that they were taking care of this child in their respite home, he only had 2 accidents at night.
That's amazing.
It was.
That's what a little support and compassion and kindness can do.
Right, and looking for the message behind the behavior.
And alleviate that fear.
Yes. All right, moving to tip number 4, say what you mean and communicate your message clearly. Making a situation predictable can go a long way toward helping someone feel calm and safe and helping them to be able to successfully participate. Some people need specific and detailed information about what will happen, when it will happen, or why it will happen. So make sure that your words are communicating clearly and concisely. Evaluate your communication system to ensure your message is accurate and understood. Whether you're using, verbal words or you're using pictures, icons, but be very concrete and to the point. And of course, use words and phrases that have meaning to the individual. For example, someone might have not been exposed to different ways, slang, what's up, dog, get it together, personal items. Really think about what you're saying and check for understanding before moving on.
Yeah, staying in that concrete.
Exactly.
So they can understand what you mean. Okay, tip number 5.
When in doubt, write it out or use pictures. Sometimes talk is useless. The spoken word is very transient. It lingers for a short time, and then unless the listener can hold it in memory, it's gone. So always try to supplement your message or information in writing. We've talked about this with the visual pictures, visual schedules. Use checklists, provide directions, post schedules, offer rules in writing. If a person uses pictures or symbols, use these as well. A picture is truly worth 1,000 words. Also, most people with ASD have a difficult time with transitions. So you might be able to designate a change card to signal when things in the schedule will change, and making sure that the person understands that, okay, we're going to do something different now, and have that picture of what we're going to do, but right now we're going to change, and having that card to kind of alert them to, oh, we're going to do something different now, can really go a long way to helping people feel safe and in control. And when, as we've been saying, when words don't seem to work, always consider pictures or written words just to help supplement that message. Do you have a case example, Jody?
I do. This MUI started out in a positive manner. So an individual, she was at her house crying, and she said she missed her neighbor who happened to be a peer that lives next door. And staff said, okay, let's go see him. And I thought, oh, this is great. Well, they were only there a short time. And when it was time to leave, staff kind of directed her, like, time to go home. And the individual began yelling. She was yelling so loud that one of the peers that she was visiting, like the roommate, was upset, and he was covering his ears, telling her to leave. And she pushed him down. He fell over a chair. Staff had to try to physically get her out of the home. She pulled the awning off the front of the house and was trying to hit staff with it. I mean, it went from 0 to 10 in a minute.
Sounds like it.
So by the time they got home, she was upset. She was still, physically aggressing, trying to break the TV, slap the staff person in the face, and had to be restrained again. And this started out as a positive thing. She really wanted to see her neighbor. And I think because she didn't know what happened next, and she didn't have an opportunity to make a choice to leave, that this all just escalated her behavior right away. And I think a picture schedule for visiting her friend who lived next door would be a perfect way. So she knows that we can do this again. Or when I go visit, this is what we do. We sit down together and talk, and then we have dinner together, and then we have dessert, and then we play a board game, and then I know it's time to go home. Or whatever the schedule may be that she had the opportunity to participate in and create.
Yes.
So she knows what was going to happen next. And staff could have reassured her, we're going to visit again, or give her the option, why don't you stay a little bit longer and we'll leave when it's time for dinner or when it's time to get ready for bed. But just giving them a picture schedule to know what's going to happen next could have probably been a whole different scenario that didn't involve having to be physically restrained. Do you have a success story?
I have two.
Oh, great.
For this tip. So this comes from a mom. A team shared these tips and these resources with a family. And mom writes, I can't believe how powerful these pictures are with my daughter. We used to spend several hours each night fighting over the chores and personal care tasks I wanted her to complete. Now with this new picture system, I just put it on the schedule and have it ready for her before she gets home. All I have to do is tell her to check her schedule and she goes over it, checks it, and gets to work. You see, the argument we used to have does not occur because she can tell the schedule this is stupid or dumb, and it will not react. I, on the other hand, now realize that I had a power struggle every time I prompted her verbally to do something. Thank goodness for these pictures. That is a great success story.
That is, and how could we incorporate that with our individuals to avoid that power struggle? You know, if we just said, okay, these are what you need to do, and then you can do it in your own time frame because you know step by step what you need to do instead of go clean your room now or go do your laundry now or do these dishes.
Right. And DSPs, you know, you're doing a lot of tasks in a short period of time, and then you have to document. So there is that pressure to get everything done. But these visual schedules, you know, when in doubt, write it out will only help you. I also have a success story. A team was supporting a young man who was having a difficult time getting to work that morning, you know, transition of leaving the house. So the team came together and they did a video. And the home manager was the star of the video, and he went through all the steps that it takes to get out of the house and off onto the vehicle. So, you know, he's putting on his shoes, he's putting on his coat and zipping it up, he's putting on his hat, he's grabbing his lunchbox, opening the door, walking out the door and seeing the sidewalk in the van with the van driver and walking down and then entering the vehicle and saying hello to everyone. This individual liked this video so much, and it helped him be so much more successful getting from the house into the van for the transition to go off to work. And we'll make sure that you get this video too, because it's a very creative way of doing, you know, a visual support.
Yeah, and they knew what was coming next, and they could actually see it.
Yes. All right, tip number 6, change your approach. So with this tip, we need to look inwardly. Look at yourself. How can you change your own actions or reactions when supporting somebody with ASD? How can you change your voice or your words? You could consider whispering or, again, slowing down your words. Try singing the message. Perhaps you could stop talking for a period of time. Stop moving and keep your hands still. Again, I know that's not easy for those of us who talk with our hands, but, you know, role modeling and trying this and practicing during staff meetings. Breathe slowly. Demonstrate calmness. Smile. Wait. Again, just giving that time. So change what you do and observe how this can change what others do.
And I do have an example, and I can't make this stuff up. So anyway, there's an individual, and she wanted to cash her paycheck. I mean, who doesn't want to cash their paychecks? And staff said, oh, you'll have to wait. And again, they didn't mean anything by it. They just said, oh, you know, you have to wait. We'll do it later, whatever. Well, she got upset and began hitting herself. She tried to walk out in front of a moving car. Staff literally had to grab her, pull her back, and in the end, 911 was called. The police came and they took her to a psych hospital for an evaluation, all because she wanted to cash her check. Now, I know, I'm pretty sure everybody else is on the same schedule. Like, you know that you get paid on Fridays, whether it's this Friday or next Friday.
Yes.
You know that's something you could plan for. And if staff may have changed their approach, their reaction to her and said, yes, we will cash your check, you know, answering in the affirmative instead of, oh, no, you're going to have to wait. Well, I think this whole situation could have been avoided. I mean, can you imagine the trauma of having to go to get a psych eval just because you wanted to cash your paycheck? So I think being planful, again, reframing your response so it's affirmative, giving simple steps of, okay, we're going to go, but first we have to do X, Y, and Z, and then we can go cash your check. Or, hey, it's Friday. We're going to go cash your check first. Let's run out and get breakfast, and then we'll go. Or, I'm going to pick you up from work, and then we'll go cash your check. be planful and mindful and keep these simple strategies in place so we can avoid these kind of power struggle situations that end up becoming psych hospitalizations.
So I have a success story. One time I was out visiting folks, and I was at a waiver home, and a person was getting home, a person with ASD was getting home, and I noticed that the DSP was singing to this person. And if you could have seen their interaction, I'm getting goosebumps right now, because she was singing and he was just smiling, and this was a person that had some pretty significant self-injurious behavior. But he was just leaning in, and she was singing about their evening that night. And he just had the biggest smile. And he also likes to drum on his chest. So he would start drumming on his chest, and so she would start drumming on her chest, the whole time singing about their evening and what they were going to do. And then he would start drumming on her chest, and so she would start drumming on his chest. And it was beautiful to see, Jody, just watching this person sing. She was a really good singer too. But even if you can't sing, I'm sure that, people would enjoy just a different way of, just receiving information.
Yeah, that's great.
All right, tip number 7, don't ask me why. Why? What if a person doesn't know why? Or what if he cannot communicate the why? So continually asking questions, especially why questions, can cause extreme anxiety and distress. So provide some information about the situation instead of asking for information. And remember to use pictures or written words to help supplement the words that you're saying verbally. Also, ask questions that offer a choice instead of being open-ended. I know sometimes that's really hard for the social service folks, because we ask a lot of open-ended questions. But when you're working with somebody with ASD, it's really important that you give those concrete questions where you're offering a choice. It will really pull someone gently into that interaction rather than putting them in a position of having to develop and articulate an answer.
Instead of asking why you're here, ask, are you here because you're pain? Do you have pain? Are you sick? Maybe have a drawing of a body, a human body, even if it's a stick figure. Maybe they can circle where it hurts.
Yes.
If they don't want to use words. Show me where you hurt. Tell me where you're hurt. Here's a picture. Point to where it hurts.
Great suggestions, Jody. All right, tip number 8, give me choices. We can't stress this enough. Having choices offers control. We all like to have control over our lives and our environment. It can reduce anxiety and stress. So consider giving choices such as what a person can do, in what order can they do things, who can participate, when to take a break, what to eat, what to wear. And these are just a few examples of ways that we can add choice to any activity. Start making the choice option a part of your typical interaction, and you'll be surprised at how easily and naturally it happens.
Yeah, and our individuals, they have so little control of their lives. They depend on others for so much, and just that little bit of having a choice does make them feel empowered. An individual, she got a Bob Evans gift card in the mail, and the mail came at lunchtime, so staff had already prepared lunch. So they're like, oh, we can't go out for lunch, but how about later, maybe tonight when staff is here? And that individual waited all day very patiently because she was so excited. I mean, who's not excited to get a gift card in the mail?
Right.
And later she became super upset because when the second shift staff came on, they're like, well, we're not going to go to dinner tonight. But what if staff would have presented some real options, like, I don't think we can make it today, but we could go tomorrow or tomorrow night. You pick the time. So giving them some options instead of just saying no or later. You're right. You're concrete. You're giving options. And hey, let's add a visual to it. Put it on the calendar so they can actually see when might be a good time that they could go. Do you have a success story, Heather?
I do. So I was out doing a visit, and the person that I was visiting did not like it when new people were at her house. So I made sure, are you sure it's okay for me to be here? And the staff said, no, we've got this covered. So when the lady came home, her favorite staff offered, hey, do you want to go get your snack or do you want to freshen up your makeup first? And this really helped her ease into the environment. She had a big smile. She came back with her makeup freshened, and then she was ready for her snack. And it just offered her so much comfort and control, which is really key to supporting folks.
Thank you.
Tip number 9, be patient. And we've been talking about this, giving time. Patience communicates respect and caring. You're telling someone they are worth your time and attention. So make sure you're giving people time to be ready and time to respond. Again, counting in your head, allowing 5 to 10 seconds of wait time in between questions or statements. Except when someone attempts to follow your directions or offers any response. An attempt is not a refusal. Treat it as a success. And remember, a refusal may mean that the person is not ready. Maybe we could try a little bit later. And avoid rushing and give time. Successfully sharing a quiet, calm moment when the person is in a place to begin.
And when you're interviewing an individual with ASD, again, give them time to process the question, but then give them more time to provide the answer as well. And, once you've found that calm, quiet place where you can interview them, maybe they need somebody in the room with them that they feel comfortable with.
Yes.
And maybe you don't get the information you want on your first visit. You have to build that rapport. You may have to come back 2, 3, or 4 times before that individual is comfortable with you. Also, thinking about if an individual with ASD doesn't look you in the eye, it doesn't mean that they're lying. It could mean it's a sensory issue and they're not comfortable with making that eye contact. And these are just some good tips for when you are meeting with our folks, because it is uncomfortable for them. And if the words aren't working, put it in a picture. Ask the individual to draw. Maybe they could draw what happened, or maybe they have the ability to write what happened, or maybe they have something like an iPad or some sort of other computer where they can give you a response typed out. Maybe when words fail, try a different way of communicating. Also, I want you to think about when you're looking at your investigation, we talked about all these things today about the message behind the behavior, but think about, could a power struggle have occurred? What was the contributing factor? Was it really a sensory issue? Did the person have space to calm? Did they have time to calm? Do they have an identified safe spot to go that helps them calm down? Think about, did they feel anxious because they didn't know what to expect? And could some sort of visual calendar have helped them overcome that? Is that something that the SSA and the team can work on to help with the prevention plan? Could that visual schedule be the prevention plan? Was there clear communication? And do staff know what's expected of them so they can really support the person? But I think that it's important for the IA to work with SSAs and the team and use these 10 tips that we've shared with you today for prevention planning, but also looking at them to see if they were actually the cause and contributing factors of the incident. Heather, how about tip number 10?
Honor special interests, and we already talked a little bit about this. And these suggestions are for younger students, building lessons around special topic interests where the person can shine and be the expert of the classroom or the group. And don't worry about making an obsession worse by allowing time to discuss the special interests. Everybody has special interests, and we participate in them because this brings us enjoyment. It's a great way to connect people to their community too, to others who have these special interests. Jody, you have a success story about special interests?
I do, and thankfully, the family honored this individual special interest many, many years ago. In fact, I was an intern, so it was really a long time ago. There was an individual who loved to talk about the marquee at the Palace Theater, and she was passionate about it. And the team kept saying this word, perseverate. I'm sure you've all heard that word. Oh, she perseverates on the topic. We probably should try to steer her away from it. Well, her family totally embraced her love of the theater, and she got season tickets. And so she could go to the theater all the time, and actually she had 2 tickets so she could take staff. And that was so important to her, and she felt so validated when she got to participate and she got to share her knowledge of the theater. And it just would make her light up, and it made her day go more smoothly. So think about that. Maybe we should get rid of that word, perseverate.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion, Jody. Great story. So if you would like to increase your knowledge about autism spectrum disorders, or maybe you'd like to refresh your knowledge base, O'Calley has the ASD Strategies in Action. It's the Autism Certification Series. It's online. It's free to people who live in Ohio. It's demonstrated with real-life examples, filmed in a variety of settings. And you can do this at your own pace. It's 30-plus hours. So I know as investigators, and we thank you so much for your hard work, you work under extremely difficult conditions. But if you can just commit to 15 minutes a week and have an accountability partner where, maybe it's another investigator that you work with, or maybe it's somebody who is on the team of somebody with ASD, maybe you can commit to 15 minutes a week to, get through these modules so that, you can really increase your knowledge base about ASD. So they're available. We'll make sure that you get the link. Also, this is the Regional Liaison Team, MAP, my coworkers and I. So we've been rolling out the Autism Series statewide. So if you're working with a team, SSA or a provider who needs more information about supporting people with ASD, please connect with your regional liaison. We'll be able to help them access information. We'll be able to connect them to other teams, to success stories. So there's a lot of information out there, and we want you to be able to connect teams to more resources.
And it can only strengthen our system.
Exactly. Well, thank you all for your attention today. If you have any questions, feel free to contact Jody Giesler at her contact information that's on the screen, or you could reach out to me, or you could always reach out to the MUI office as well. Thank you so much for the work you do.
Thank you.